about fears. Let's talk about love. Yeah, I got fears, but I ain't got no love.
Let's jump right into the content today. Another deep dive. This is the abduction of 8-year-old Kirsten Hatfield. Almost said Kristen. It's not Kristen, it's Kirsten. This happened in Midwest Oklahoma. No, not that geographical section, not the west, east, north, south. It's an actual town called Midwest in Oklahoma on May 13th, 1997. What made me want to do this case is probably 8 years ago, I was contacted by young Kirsten's mother, Shannon Hazen. And she wanted to attend one of my cold case conferences that we were doing for the American Investigative Society of Cold Cases at the time. And she was registering it for it and sending in her money. And I was like, oh, once I heard her story, there was no way I was charging her any money to attend. And her story we'll get into a little bit too. She, to me, is... a lot of people send me messages and say, oh, you're a hero. Bullshit. People like Shannon. She's a hero. And we'll get into her story. But you ever have days where things from your past just pop in your head? You're doing dishes, taking out the garbage, feeding the dogs, outside working, whatever it is. And all of a sudden, you just think about something that you haven't thought about in years. That was the case here. But what triggered it was I was actually researching another case. And there were some similarities. And I like to compare cases a lot. Like if I have a case and then I'm researching another one and I'm like, ooh, that is similar to this. Well, this one was solved, so how? What similarities can I use in this case that could help solve this case? It's always learning. Investigations and cold cases, you're always learning. And if you want to. You can take something from every case and learn from it. And that's what I try to do. Not just in cold cases. I try to do that in life. But I was working on a case and Kirsten Hatfield's case popped into my mind. But the older I get, my mind just doesn't seem quite as sharp. I used to remember everything. People would say I had a photographic memory. Anymore, though, it takes a little bit. Especially what I hate the most is driving and I'll remember a quote of a movie or a quote of a song and I can't remember where it's from. Boy, does that bug me. And then I just stick with it and finally, might be days later, it'll come to me. I'm like, yes. And it feels like such a win, such a success. I did it. I remembered it. You ever have that? But I digress. Those movie quotes, they get me all the time. But anyhow, Kirsten Hatfield. So Mom Shannon is a single mom. She has 2 children living with her. 3-year-old Faith and 8-year-old Kirsten. They sleep in the same bedroom, the same bed. And at 11:30 on Tuesday, it was a Tuesday night, she puts them to bed. She wakes up at 6:30 in the morning and goes to get her children up, and Kirsten's gone. Just gone. Immediate panic sets in. And before long, FBI, police, everybody's brought in. Because I think what really triggered it was the fact that Kirsten's underwear were found torn in the backyard. As you can see, leaning up against the fence here, the placement of those underwear there is very peculiar to me. So sometimes investigators will look at something like this and just chalk it off as to, okay, her underwear is there, where do we go now? But for me, I get kind of stuck there. I'll continue on, but it's not good enough for me to know that her underwear are there and that now it's a possible abduction. To me, I want to know why there. Why are they located right there? You know, and when I was talking about movie quotes and eventually getting the answer, it reminds me of my favorite quote from Albert Einstein. And he said, "It's not that I'm smarter than everybody else. I just stick with the problem longer." I equate some of my success to that. Okay? I want to know why. Because when you understand the why, it helps you see the bigger picture. So, those underwear being there bother me. And again, it doesn't bother me just because they're there, the location of them. Anyhow, we'll get into more of that there. So, yeah, imagine you as a parent waking up to find your child missing. That's the first panic wave that sets in. And you're looking all around, can't find her. You go out in the yard and you see her underwear. You look at her underwear and they're torn. An 8-year-old child. Do you think that your whole soul almost leaving you? I can't imagine the feeling of that. Next thing you know, everybody's there searching, okay? And here it is, 2023. Kirsten's still never been found. So let's look at our victimology. Now, in my last video, I think we talked about Terry Bowers and the Boy Scout and how a boy, a young child, doesn't have much of a victimology. She, in this case, didn't make enemies. You know, even if she did make an enemy, what? She going to make another second grader angry? And the second grader is going to come over and abduct her? No, it makes no sense, right? Is there anything else in the background that we should be worried about? Well, we have to look at Kirsten's mother. She's single. What is her elements? What does she do? Well, Kirsten made it no secret that she used drugs recreationally, meaning it wasn't an everyday part of her life. She wasn't a habitual user. But she did, and she readily admitted this because she thought maybe that could be the reason that her daughter's missing. Who knows, right? I talked about this before. So I would say that Kirsten still has a low risk of being a victim, even with the recreational drug use of the mom. But there were some tales that maybe she ran away, which I find so hard to believe. But there was those tales, and even they were coming from the family, which I don't understand, because that would mean maybe that there was some talk about it or some turmoil in the house. I'm not sure. But how does the runaway aspect come about? Regardless, Kirsten's missing. Police do a neighbor canvass, and if you look at the neighborhood, it is stacked back to back with houses on these streets. I mean, houses are literally arm length apart. How could something happen like this and no one here, right? That's what a lot of people will say. Now, the timeline of this is, 11:30 at night to 6:30 in the morning. So somebody struck at night. Why? Well, it's the most common form of abduction if you don't want to be noticed, right? Think of Kristen Smart. No. See? My mind again. Yeah, Elizabeth Smart. See? I just stick with the problems longer. Elizabeth Smart was abducted from her house. Same with Madeleine McCann, I believe. Some people don't believe that. That's my thought on it. But unlike John Benet Ramsey, who wasn't abducted, that was from inside the house, my opinion only. But if you want to go non-detected, which killers don't, you operate under the cover of night. Everybody's sleeping. You can go in, do your dastardly deed, and leave. So what evidence is left behind? What can we tell anything from this? Well, it's not a rural area, which means I will sometimes include stranger abduction in this. But yet, you try to picture, okay, somebody's just driving around trolling. Let's say a serial killer, a pedophile. He would have to know that an 8-year-old child lives in that home, right? And there's certain ways you can tell that, but at the middle of the night, are you going to be able to tell that? Maybe, but it's a lot harder. And by that I mean, let's say the serial offender is out driving around looking for a victim, and he sees a girl's bicycle, a young child's bicycle parked out there. He can reasonably infer that a child lives there. But is he going to take that chance in his mind and say, okay, I'm going to do that house tonight? Not knowing anything about the house, right? And just hope that a child's there. Not really. Now let's back it up, and let's say the serial offender is driving around the neighborhood and he sees an 8-year-old girl riding that bike and go into that driveway and park it and walk in the house. Now, could he come back later that night and say, yeah, sure, yeah, that's a little bit better that I would believe that. But then what does that tell you? That really means this wasn't random, was it? He was trolling. He's out kind of stalking for a victim. Now, maybe he locked in on this child. Maybe he didn't. But now let's look at the entranceway. The entranceway is the way the offender came into the house. Can we determine that? Well, investigators did determine that. And they determined it was a window, which is not uncommon. It was the bedroom window of the child. Now, originally when I heard this, I'm thinking of the Lindbergh baby kidnapping and a ladder. And I'm thinking, man, to take an 8-year-old child down a ladder is very hardcore. You have to be pretty big, pretty strong, 55 pounds thrown over your shoulders without them screaming or forcing them down the ladder still. But all that's mute, right? Because when I looked at the house, I see that it's first floor and it's very easy to gain entry. But I kept looking and I seen like a 6-foot, 8-foot fence that surrounds the house. So then I start thinking to myself, Kenny, why would an outside offender, a random intruder, who, one, doesn't know that a child even lives there because there's no indication of it, just happened to pick a ground floor window that is around back, surrounded by an 8-foot fence. See how that makes no sense? And an outside offender, wouldn't he, if he had his mindset on that house, wouldn't he choose a window on the side or even in the front of the house, even though the front of the house is more likely to be seen? But at 3 a.m, you're not scaling an 8-foot fence. Or if the fence has a door back there, you start still not risking it. There's a fence there. That deters people. A fence is a deterrent. That's why you put it up. So it makes no sense to me that it would be an outside offender. No. To me, this is somebody that knew an 8-year-old victim is living there and knows that that 8-year-old victim is going to be their target. Now, that narrows the pool, but it doesn't quite eliminate for me somebody driving to the scene and abducting the child. But they know the child. So they could know the child from school, from church, social functions, something. But they've been in that house. Or they know that house, one or the other. Because they know that they have to go around back through this 8-foot fence to get the exact correct window that the child's sleeping in. Now, a neighborhood canvass was done, which is very important. I can't stress enough how important. To me, that is even, and I'll probably get some disagreement here, but to me, a neighborhood canvass is almost as important, if not more important, than evidence. Yes, I'll say it. Because even if direct evidence fails, you always go back to that neighbor. You know the people that live there. And if you look at this photo of all the houses, I mean, you just go door to door. What did you see? What did you see? And even if they say nothing, you know who lived there. So then, if it becomes a cold case 20 years down the road and the new cold case detective gets it, he doesn't have to search for who was there. All he has to do, and I've done this, is start next door neighbor. What's their name? Have they been arrested since? For any pedophilia, any assaults? Oh, yes, right there. Then that's a good place to start. And you wouldn't have that information if a neighborhood canvass wasn't done. So, did a neighborhood canvass help in this? Yes and no. But let's go back to the evidence. We have a ripped pair of underwear. Again, out in the yard, laying up against the fence, which I still don't have an answer for. But there was more evidence. There's one more piece of evidence. And that is very important evidence. Blood. There was blood on the windowsill going into that child's bedroom. And remember, there was a 3-year-old child in there as well. And the 3-year-old child did give police information, and she said there was somebody in her room, but that, couldn't say anything more. Blood. As an investigator, when you see that you have blood evidence, it gives you such a great sense of hope. Yet, it also does the exact opposite. It plays on your worst fear. Because, more than likely, I'm going to ask you this. Whose blood do you think that is? Well, let's follow the blood trail. Is there any other blood? You have spots. Newspaper reports that I read called it blood spatter, which would be incorrect. And the reason it's incorrect, because when you hear blood spatter in a abduction room, wouldn't you automatically assume it's the victim? And the victim was bludgeoned or hurt in some way that the blood cast off. It's spattered. If there's any news people or journalists watching this, this is a very good lesson to be careful about what you write. Even little words like that. Remember a couple videos ago I said about the girl getting killed and the police report wrote she got killed in the jungle? Well, yeah, her police department knows what she's referring to, but everybody else down the line has no freaking idea. They think she was eaten by lions because you write the jungle. Why can't you just write she was killed in the jungle, parentheses, 4th and Greer Street, or whatever it was? Always think about those things. In this case, a newspaper reporter said there was blood spatter. Now everybody's in a panic, thinking the girl was killed, and even it does the most damage to the mom, because it does two things. She thinks, oh, my child was killed in that room and there was blood spatter on the windowsill. Two, the millions of people that read that now think the mom could be involved because there's blood spatter inside the house and it's spatter. But it wasn't spatter. They were blood spots. Okay? Big difference. Big difference. Just like anything in life. Your electrician, veterinarian, actor, it's the minute details. You have to be meticulous in your craft. Especially here so you don't hurt somebody. Anyway. Blood on the windowsill. They also find blood on the fence. In addition, they find blood on the torn underwear. Now that, as a parent, would send me through the goddamn roof. Because what do you think? That's my daughter's blood. That's what I would think. She's sexually assaulted. Her underwear are torn right there. There's blood. I would lose it. But as an investigator, you detach yourself from that. Focus in. Okay, what does this evidence tell us? It's given us clues. We just got to know how to take those clues and apply them. Blood on the windowsill. There are drops. Blood on her underwear. Blood on the fence. Well, she was taken in this direction. Okay, that's initially what it tells us. Well, what do we got to do now? Got to send that evidence away. Okay, we got to get it tested. We got to test that blood and see what happens. So they do. And lo and behold, the blood comes back to... No, it doesn't come back to the victim. That's the rub. Okay? Everybody assumes. You assumed. I assumed that it's the victim's blood. Right? She was assaulted in the house, whatever it is. It's her blood. The worst thing imaginable has happened. Well, guess what? They get a DNA profile from the blood, and it's not hers. In fact, it's an unknown male. Okay. As an investigator, I am through the roof. This is the best news I could get. Because what's it do? It gives you a lead. And as an investigator, as a good detective, that's all you want in life, is to have another lead to follow up on. So now I got a big one. Okay, I already knew, or more than likely, that it was an unknown male that came in and took her. Now it's confirmed, okay? So those few female suspects that I had, maybe that didn't have a baby and they wanted to raise a baby on their own or whatever, and they okay, I had a couple here. They weren't strong, but I had them. Guess what? Cut them out. I don't need them anymore, okay? I'm looking for a male. And I put it into CODIS. Exactly what they did. No hit. Okay? I got 10 good suspects. Let's go get their DNA. No hit. This shows you the range of emotions that an investigator has. Because just a couple weeks ago, when I got that news that that blood was not the victim's, I was up here. I was on cloud 9. But now, all my suspects don't match. It's not in CODIS. Now, what some poor quality detectives will do is that they'll disregard those results and say, it's still my suspect. That blood is from a handyman that worked there 20 years ago. Even though it's fresh, in their mind, they'll explain it away. Because they are tunnel vision on their suspect. That's how innocent people go to jail. I don't care how hard you worked on this suspect. You had him in the interrogation room and you tore him apart, and then you went to his background, you tore that apart, and he fits. He fits the profile. He fits everything that you think the offender should be. When that DNA result comes back and it doesn't match him, you gotta let it go. You have to let it go. That's your job. Swallow your pride. Swallow your ego and say, okay, I was wrong. Go back, and that's happened to me. You go in, sit down with your district attorney and say, guess what? I was wrong. Be man enough to admit it. You didn't arrest the guy, so it's okay. No harm, no foul. Maybe you accused him in the interrogation room. Hey, that's a tactic, okay? You're doing your due diligence. But now that you got direct physical evidence to an offender, you just have to stop. Take a deep breath, regroup. Okay, let's start from ground one. We got this DNA profile. Let's go back to the grind. And where do you go back to? Someone said it, neighborhood canvas. Because remember, we've already deduced that it's somebody from in that area. Somebody that knows the house. Somebody that, I can't say for sure they didn't come by car and they had to come by foot. But more than likely, they came by foot. And they knew where that window was. And they knew that this victim was in there. And they zeroed in on this victim. Okay? So in, I believe it was 2015, a new cold case detective takes over. And I don't know his name. I used to know his name. I have talked to him. Because when I met Shannon Hazen, the mom, at this cold case conference, she spoke very highly of this cold case detective. Young guy, she said he reminds me of you. Very determined and so on and so forth. And I've got nothing but good things to say. I want to hook you guys up, to talk. Yep, absolutely. Well, in 2015, this new cold case detective takes over and he goes right to the neighborhood canvas. And he starts talking to people again. And he comes across this guy named Palma. And I think it was Anthony Palma. Anthony Palma lived 2 houses down. And they had obviously talked to him back in 1997 when this happened. His alibi was, hey, I was at home. I don't know what else to tell you. I was home. They talked to him again 2015, and he says the same thing, But this time, they take his DNA. He says, yeah, no problem. I got nothing to do with it. And guess what? It matched. It matched. An arrest was made in 2015. He went to trial in 2017, and he was convicted of the murder of Kristen Hatfield, age 8. No body was ever recovered. No additional evidence that I saw was ever recovered. Now, should he have been convicted? Well, that's not for me to decide. A jury decided that. But without a body, how do we know she's dead? Well, some idiot will ask that. And my response is, if you got to ask that, you're an idiot. She's 8 years old. She didn't run away. The question that I have, and Palma never answered this, not only where she is, but the blood. The blood. He can't explain it away. If it was just on the windowsill, I think if he would have got arrested based on that, there's a good possibility that he had been found not guilty. But his blood was found on the victim's underwear. You can't explain that away. You can't. You can't explain that away. You had physical contact with that victim. The blood drops tell you a story. Where he physically was at that, well, you can't narrow it down to that time, but I think for all intent and purposes you can. He was at that window. So you can infer things. Equate it to this. A good district attorney once told me this. You're in the courtroom. You walk in, it's sunny. And you're in there for 5 hours at a court hearing. You come out, everything is wet. Everything. Trees, cars. You didn't see it happen. But you can infer, because of what you see, that it rained. Take that same principle and apply it to this case. Because of his blood, his DNA being where it was, you can infer that he went into that bedroom and he abducted this child and sexually assaulted her based on the blood on her underwear. Now, what puzzles me, and I would want to know, is what injury did he sustain for him to bleed, right? Because I don't know really the location of the blood drops on the fence, whether it was inside the fence or outside the fence, but I'm just curious as to if that injury occurred inside that room, that Kirsten caused that injury. I doubt that. But something happened along his route that he took that night. As you can see from here, this is his most likely route. Okay? He goes out his back door, out back, either over the fence, which I doubt. There's got to be a gate there, I would think. I mean, as you see the photograph of the underwear, they're up against hinges, but I don't know where that door is. Usually the door would be to the front of the house. But he sustained an injury, and that intrigues me. You can't brush that off and just say, who cares? It tells us a story. We're going to stop there. No, you got to dig deeper. Because you want to understand the mentality of somebody like this offender. Did he, let's say there's a jagger bush out back, and he got scraped. And it's enough that it hurt him, and he looks down, he notices he's bleeding. And it didn't deter him. That's what I want to know. Or Could that injury have been a triggering event? We've talked about this many times, where there's an event that triggers you to go do something. Was the injury a triggering event? Did he get in a fight with his wife and she slapped him or cut him or whatever it is, and then he goes and does this? Or did it happen in the commission of it? It's just very, very curious about that blood, because that's what got him. Okay? And it shows you something, that if he knows he was bleeding and it didn't deter him, it shows how much that thing that's inside these offenders, where they're willing to take chances. Okay? Think of Ted Bundy going into the Chi Omega house and with all those girls in there. It doesn't deter him. And then after he kills there, he goes up the street a couple blocks and does it again, because he wasn't fulfilled. It's very fascinating. And I would want to know that about this offender. How did the blood occur? How did that injury occur? Did you know maybe you didn't even know. But to me, if it's on her underwear and the underwear is torn, you would think it would be on his hands. His hand was cut somehow. The window that he went in was unlocked. Okay? So it's not like he had to break glass or anything like that to get in. Could have been like a big splinter. I get splinters all the time. I mean, do they bleed? Yes, I guess, but not a whole lot. I am just very curious about the blood. The location of the underwear intrigues me as well, because they're torn off of her in her own yard. Does that mean she was sexually assaulted? And make no mistakes, this is a sexually motivated crime. But would he be brazen enough to assault the child right there in her own yard? I mean, the underwear being torn off right there in her own yard tells me yes. That's where the assault occurred. Why else would they be ripped off? Only he can answer that. But guess what? He will never answer that, because vigilante justice took care of this cheese slap. Okay? Because when he was in jail, his roommate strangled him to death. Good. Yeah, you could look at it that way. Yet, now we'll never get the answers to where Kirsten is. We'll never get the answers to why the blood was there or why the underwear was there. I guess it's a blessing in disguise that the underwear was there. I mean, that really tipped the authorities to, hey, this is an S&A abduction. This isn't no runaway. But it leaves some questions to me from an outsider looking in as to why it was done there. Could have been done as a control method. She had a t-shirt on. Probably that's it, t-shirt and her underwear. Where's the t-shirt? I also don't know whether he was living alone. Look how close he lives to their house, to the victim's house. 2 houses down. You throw a stone. And guess what? When I told you that you can learn from these cases, especially solved cases, very important to go back and look at those. It's like the show Mythbusters. I always wanted to come up with a crime show called, Crime Busters. Like Tiffany Valente. People would say, oh, you can't walk 3 miles in no shoes. Your feet would be torn up. And it's bullshit. Okay? And what I want to do is get somebody, because I ain't doing it, but get somebody with no shoes and have them walk 3 miles and come back and look at their feet. You know, things like that. OJ couldn't have made it from here to here. We'll show that we can. One of the myths that would have been busted is that an offender, after he commits a murder, will leave the area. This offender stayed in the same house, 2 houses down from where this occurred, the entire time, till he was arrested. And then when he was arrested, police tore apart his house, his yards, used ground penetrating radar back there, dug up, had backhoes in there looking for this little girl, and they still never found her. Tore up his floorboards looking for evidence. Now, one of the things that I want to know is, he was married at the time of the arrest, but was he living there by himself? Was he single? I would like to know that. If I had to guess, I'm going to guess that he was. He would have been probably 40 years old at the time this happened. I took some photographs on Google Street View of his house in 2011. So he wasn't arrested yet. He's still living there. That's probably his truck in the driveway. You know? He didn't move from the area. That's a myth that people need to get rid of. Now, sometimes they will. Not all the time. This guy proves that. Alibis. Pretty weak, right? 2 times he was interviewed previous to being arrested, he said, I was at home. Is it an alibi? It's surely not ironclad, right? But what do you do if you're single? And you have nobody to tell, you know, you're at home on couch watching TV. Nobody knows. You have to give that alibi. It's the truth. Obviously his wasn't. Sure, he may have been home. But at some time between 11:30 and 6:30, he snuck out and he abducted Kirsten, and he assaulted her, and he murdered her. What brings us all up is the torn underwear in that yard. If he had somebody living with him in that house, then I could see him possibly sexually assaulted. But look at this overall image. I mean, there's a lot of woods. There's a lot of areas for you to assault somebody. Why would you do it that close to the house? So the underwear being torn off there, almost to me, is a frenzied state. And I don't believe that the sexual assault would have occurred right there. I just think if I had to guess, I would say that he was probably intoxicated. But this happened on a Tuesday. If he worked, now if he was unemployed, a lot of times I would say, well, yeah, or a Friday, Saturday night, people are drinking or drunk. This was a Tuesday. He worked as a groundskeeper. Maybe he was laid off at the time. Maybe he didn't have to go in early or whatever, but it doesn't matter. It just seems that this was a frenzy. Like he ripped those underwear off. And he did it, he wasn't very smart, right? Because you know that they're going to be found. Now, sure, maybe you don't know you're bleeding, so you don't know that you just left DNA on them, on the underwear. But why would you do it to begin with? To show an intimidation factor? Because you're in such a frenzy? We'll never know. Back to Shannon Hazen. Shannon ended up in 1990, in the late 90s. This happened in 97. She went and got her cosmopolitan license for hair, which is a great goal and step. Yet she didn't stop there. Because of this incident, she went on to get her criminal justice degree. And she got a master's degree in social work. She was a probation officer. She was a parole officer. All because of this. She took a negative, the biggest negative there is in the world. This is even bigger than, let's say you find your child dead. Hey, you put it to rest, it's a chapter, it's closed, you move on. No, that never happened here. Yes, there was an arrest, which is huge, but her body's never been recovered. Now, for some people, that is very, very, very difficult to overcome in life. She overcame it. She actually forgave this dick slap. I don't think I could forgive. I could learn. And that's what I want to do, is learn from these people as to why. Now, through the years and through the experience, I think I've gotten closer to getting those answers. But Shannon Hazen is a hero to all. Just like Kirsten is. Sometimes we sit back and question why we're here. God's plan. Is there even a God? If he could do this unspeakable act to these children, in this case, Kirsten. It all depends on what you believe. Shannon's, her intent, her belief was to make life better and do good and to help the system. There was a lot of fingers pointed at her. I can't imagine that. And she turned that negative into a positive. Now, there is no closure. There's no bringing back Kirsten. But Shannon is somebody that I think a lot of people should look up to. And I know I do. And for me, it was a privilege. And it was an honor to meet Shannon. To shake her hand. To hug her. Knowing what she went through. And knowing how she overcame that. To live the best life that she could. With that, I think we'll end. We'll end on a high note. We'll end on my admiration for a mother who was put through hell, who persevered and kept going when she had every excuse to not keep going. Okay? So, for that, it's not a salute for Mains out. This is a salute to Shannon Hazen. Now Mains out.
Yeah, let's talk about